with that, we have about 10 minutes for questions, remarks, and additions from the floor. Who would like to kick off? Any questions or remarks? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. This Kaimenyi is my name from Kenya. My question is directed to Ruud Grimm, who talked about the use of satellite to do warnings on pests and disease, droughts and floods, which is a good idea. But what baffles me once in a while, Mr. President, is the lack of preparedness on the part of our respective governments, despite these warnings. So I wanted to find out from him what can be done about it. Is it because the governments don't give it a priority, these warnings a priority, or is lack of funds? And finally, Orofuke Kofie, there is something lacking in our culture with regard to solar power irrigation. We have a lot of energy there, water harvesting. So again, what can we do really to energize our people to resort to water harvesting and even reusing wastewater? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me immediately, Professor, yes, please.
Thank you very much. Just a short comment. Here again, I'm interested in the impact on the citizens' well-being, quality of life, all these discussions. I mean, it's interesting intellectual entertainment. Then what? I mean, to my mind, there are too many nexuses. Sorry, Veronica. Too many projects, action plans, roadmaps, forgetting the essentials, which is reconnecting with the citizens. Without trust, any policy shall fail, whatever the political program anywhere in the world. That's one thing. Now, assuming that we can recover lost trust, it's not building trust, it's recovering lost trust, which is extremely difficult, not to say impossible, then there is a need to explore how to constructively articulate all these different nexuses, action plans, roadmaps, initiatives together to achieve and sustain the citizens' well-being, quality of life in world society, which is, after all, the third millennium's top priority. So it's a big question mark for me. I'm not convinced. I don't have the impression that we're going around in circles, not getting anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you for that remark. Did I miss? Isolina.
Thank you very much. I had one actually this morning also for Greg, and that can apply to the panel now. South Africa or the other colleagues from the field is the actually prevention of conflict due to the pressure on resources. So you did mention the transboundary cooperation. Do you experiment that? And the one I had for Greg before is from the analysis you have done. West Africa was a bit this morning. Do you see common trends, or the drivers of conflict are very local specific, or do you still can you already see some common trends across regional countries? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Let's try to get to the answers of the questions. The first question was to Ruud Grimm from the Kenyan ambassador. You recall the question?
Yeah, it was, if I understood well, related to the role of the government. I think also maybe also related to
preparedness on the side of governments. Yes.
Yeah. Now, let's say I know that several programs are running in the region, and also Kenyan, let's say, institutions are involved. I think one institution is called RCMRD, and I think it's operating from Nairobi. So there are a lot of, let's say, organizations and activities working on, let's say, gathering satellite data and making that, let's say, turning that into services and advices. But one thing is that what we also quite often see is that for some reason it stays within the government, and that was also why we turned our program really at, let's say, focusing on the needs of farmers and engaging with farmers and building, of course, the trust. And that's why we work together with NGOs and with department officers, with extension officers, because that is really, let's say, the essence. And let's say if the service that is provided has no added value for the citizen, or for the farmer, he will or will turn away from the services. So really measuring the uptake of these services constantly is a very crucial factor. And we do actually see this in, let's say, our projects, especially in Southeast Asia. This is really happening quite well, and it's working. And lastly, maybe also about Iselina, about the transboundary aspect. Yeah, if you have pastoralists moving from Mali to Burkina Faso to Chad, I don't know exactly how they are migrating over there in this region, but these services really, let's say, should be transboundary. Thank you.
Thank you. And the other question from the ambassador of Kenya was to Olufunke.
Yeah, thank you very much. You asked about what can be done with people to make them interested. And this is also related to what the professor, I think, said, yeah, is about how do we connect people. But the way I see those two questions is not necessarily about how to connect people, it's how to go to scale, because people are at the center of all these initiatives. People are really involved, but how do we go from the micro pilot level to scale? How do we reach out to more? I think that is the thing. And here I think there are multiple dimensions to that. There are government's role, but there's also the role of the private entities, the private sector, to actually bring them to scale some of those interventions. So when we talk about solar, come to think about it, solar panels, solar system is still very expensive for the average farmer in many of the countries. So the issue is what will be the appropriate financing mechanism to ensure that the farmers can have access to it, not just having access to the solar system equipment, but even to be able to maintain it after service repairs and all that. So from our perspective as a knowledge institute, what we're trying to look at is to see different modalities and come up with recommendations that can inform decision-making policy processes and other actors in terms of what is the best way to go about it. For example, in some of the projects we are implementing, we're looking at, in Ethiopia, we're looking at some of the policy that the government has introduced in terms of tax waiver and all that, to see what impact will it make, how will it incentivize the private entities to actually work together with this farmer-led irrigation system to actually make it go to scale. We're going to do that in other countries as well. So there are different ways. I think people are at the center, but it's scaling. It's just like micro here and there, but we need to go to scale, and we need policies, we need the private entities, we need multiple actors to work on this.
If you want citizens to listen to you, you must first overcome their prevailing suspicion and recover their trust. Otherwise, they won't listen to you and they won't be interested in doing skills.
I agree. And if you look at the second category of practice I talked about, we're talking about products that maybe sometimes citizens may not be interested in. So how do we get their buy-in? So one thing about of course, there's what citizen science, and there was one thing also about people is that when they see that something works, if the farmer sees that water harvesting works, or solar works, or irrigation scheduling tool works, they will adopt. They want to listen to it. In Ethiopia, for example, we use this chameleon and water fund detector only for about 200 farmers. These 200 farmers were able to reach hundreds of farmers on their own because they could also see that this thing works. So they're able to schedule their irrigation practices according to that. So I think it's still about scaling and starting with where are the bright spots? Where is it already working? And how can we learn from that? How can they learn from one another? It's a couple of just mix of several things that we have to put together to make it work, go to scale.
Thank you. Tavatswa, the question from Isolina about conflict prevention in South Africa.
Thank you. So far there's not been any conflict in terms of resources and competition for resources. But from a climate change scenario analysis perspective, we anticipate that there is going to be conflict, mostly emerging from competition for water, because it's the most scarce resource throughout the region. Most of Southern Africa itself is semi-arid, and the bulk of water is in the north, in Zambia and the DRC. But from an infrastructure perspective, most of the dams are in South Africa and Zimbabwe. So it needs a regional approach to guiding investment. And the countries that have money might need to go and construct dams in the other countries where the resources are. We've had success in terms of piloting how that can be done with the South Africa Lesotho Highlands project, where South Africa has invested in dam infrastructure in Lesotho, and Lesotho now supplies South Africa, Gauteng primarily, with water. So we need to do more of that. In terms of agriculture as well, the productive areas, especially for cereal production, have been moving over time. So the traditional cereal production areas might not be able to sustain regional demand going into the future. So again, there needs to be a regional approach to food production and securing regional food security.
Thank you. Regional approaches, that's where the EU is good at. Good. Craig, for you the question also from Isolina.
Yeah, the question was about, based upon our piloting research on predicting conflict. So first of all, the caveat is we're still figuring out, perfecting the algorithms, et cetera, right? Secondly, have we seen any trends, et cetera, on that? I mean, it's one thing I can say is that it's not one thing, and oftentimes, what we're looking for is the biophysical elements, right? That the rainfall goes down or whatever, right? But what you'll see is you might actually have situations where, two neighboring countries, the same biophysical phenomena happening, one ends up in conflict and one not, right? And that points to some social or governance issue that's at play as well. That's that extra factor, right? And so it is the interplay of these multiple things. And I hope over time, and as more research comes along, we'll start to decide what's the relative weighting of them, but right now I can't say more than that.
Thank you. David, would you have anything to add from the questions or the remarks?
No, basically, regarding the conflict, resource scarcity is a fueling thing, and climate change as well. In Ethiopia, the conflict is not mainly because of resource, as you may have heard of it. There are several factors that affect the social interaction and conflicts. So basically, the problem is when people are displaced, the issue of food security and the issue of water security especially are very important. And in our case, these factors are contributing to even worsening security of the three sectors. In the regional issue, in one of the macro study, we have seen, colleagues have seen the food production, for example, in Sudan and in Egypt, and energy production in Ethiopia, so that there will be regional trade. So they have seen this national trade and optimization of the water for food production, for energy production, so that the countries can trade among themselves, and there will be synergies.
Good. With those positive words. Olo Funke, I give you the last word, and then my neighbor will say some closing remarks.
Yeah, just on the conflict issue, I think we don't really have to wait until the conflict comes up before we start responding to it. And I think dialogue is very important. And dialogue not only at the basin level or high national level, even at the local level. There are simple tools, even, like games that people can use at local level, participatory tools that can make people to be more knowledgeable and more conscious about the nexus and how they can manage it at the local level. Same tools can also be applied at higher level. So I think dialogue, multi-stakeholder dialogue is really very important and must be used. And it's a kind of participatory process to manage the nexus and other resources very well.
Many thanks. And with that, we come to nearly the end of the session. As the last word, I would like to give to Mr. Banze from the ACP. So with that, then we end the session.
Well, last word, it's really strong. So let me exercise my Portuguese language. I've been listening. Primeiro, queria apresentar.
Firstly, I would like to apologize for the Secretary General not being present here at this stage, and I couldn't come this morning because there were many overlapping obligations. But without a doubt, I can say that it was an immense pleasure for us to once again host this briefing at the ACP House. We consider that this is one of the ways that we can contribute to our member states to, as you know, there are 79 member states. We have African, Caribbean, and Pacific states in the ACP. And we are truly a transcontinental organization. And regional issues that are being discussed are of the utmost importance to us. And on the basis of our solidarity, common challenges, and the diversity that we have, we consider we have a great contribution to make. And such briefings are really very valuable for the ACP to achieve our goals. And today we're particularly pleased to discuss a theme which is practically at the basis of the existence of all. We cannot live without land, without water, without food. And this is, of course, a very important component of all the basic issues that we need. However, in many of our countries, surviving and living, having food and a place to sleep and water to drink remains a challenge. So this is very relevant, and here the CTA and the director are doing a great job in bringing this issue to the table. I was not able to listen to all the presentations, but what I've heard showed the importance of some challenges that remain. There are three aspects that I would like to underscore. One is implementation. I think that is critical. That is the level we are, macro level, strategic level, if you want, and policy design. And what is important now is to convince our leaders, but also our citizens, that they can see the value of what we're doing, how we can use the knowledge that is being presented here in all its diversity. And second aspect is the impact we have on people's lives. How do they see this knowledge comes to be useful for them? That's also very critical. And a third aspect, I didn't follow everything, but in the previous panel it was mentioned how all this nexus between land, water, and energy, and the contribution that women, girls, and the youth in general can play in our countries. In many of our countries, we depend on agriculture, and mainly young people and women do most of the work. So this is a very important aspect that we need to take into account when we discuss issues such as agriculture and water issues. Then there's another aspect that I heard here, how we should bring together all the aspects, not just geographic issues, but also when we look at the work that the ACP is doing in terms of South-South cooperation, exchange of experience, and the possibility to scale up the knowledge. And this forum gives more substance to that objective, and this is a way that we can further contribute. Lastly, I would like to commend you for holding this briefing. Welcome to all who've participated, the moderator, all the speakers, all the participants, all the diplomatic missions present here. We see some ambassadors. The ambassador of Kenya is always very actively participating in these meetings. And thank you to our colleagues from ACP, the CTA, of course, our colleagues from the conference service, the interpreters, with all their patience, who've enabled us to speak in various languages and understand one another. So I wish you every success in the work that you're doing, and we look forward to the future briefings so that we can also talk about the results of this discussion, how this makes a difference in our citizens' lives, and how we can move forward. It's already July. For those who will soon go on holiday, I wish you very enjoyable holidays and continue your work. Thank you very much.
And a few final words as well. Dr. Hailu from the CTA.
Well, normally I would do a quick wrap-up, but the ACG, Mr. Banze, did a fantastic job. Although he wasn't there, I don't know how he managed to summarize it very well. So all the points I had here, they're already covered, in terms of the key issues that came up. In any case, I would just like to say that, as you all agree with me, we had a very rich discussion this morning in terms of the intellectual issues, the framework, and also in terms of the practice, what's happening, and where we should be pushing more of our efforts in terms of scaling up and so on. So I think we really had a very fruitful and very useful discussion. I really like to take this opportunity on behalf of CTA to thank our speakers who brought in very rich experience and insights into the discussions. I would also like to thank our chair, Wim Olthoff. I mean, he did a fantastic job, chairing the two sessions and leading us through the discussions. Of course, I'd like to thank the ACP Secretariat for giving us this excellent facility, as well as the support of the interpreters. I mean, we always very much appreciate the opportunity to have these discussions here. So with all that, I also thank you all for being here with us up to the end, and my colleague Isolina and other colleagues who are supporting to putting this all together. It takes a huge amount of effort to bring this together. So I'd like to thank Isolina and my other colleagues as well for their inputs. And finally, I would like to invite you for the networking lunch, where hopefully you can continue with some of these discussions. So thank you very much.